it said live on Facebook is on. It's on.
Okay. So, and let me pull up my other screen. Let me pull up 20 screens here and we will get going with our thing here. So,
and Alicia, you'll do a screen share with me and then I can pull up the presentation.
Yes, I think I did share it already. So,
okay.
Be able to go. Okay, hello everybody. We are live on Facebook and also on Zoom, and we are doing a wonderful segment of, let me try this again. Hi everybody. Sorry, this is Alicia Roufs from VITFriends, a national support group for vitiligo. And I'm also the chapter leader for our Minnesota group, who is the 2020 host of the World Vitiligo Day Conference. We were also going to be doing this conference this year, but of course it got bumped because of COVID. So one of the segments that we really wanted to do, it's something that gets talked about all the time in our community, is nutrition and vitiligo, and how nutrition can affect your vitiligo and vice versa and everything else in the world. And this was a segment that was really creating a lot of buzz and a lot of people wanted to hear. So Lauren and David are so generous to share their time with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but it's just something that, like I said, we wanted to bring in, and now we can because of technology. So this is wonderful. So we have a chat window going here on Zoom, and I also have our live feed pulled up on Facebook. So if you have questions, just put them in here on the chat or on a comment on Facebook. Please do not message me. Just do it in the chat windows. And then I can feed it into our guests, and we will answer those later on in the area. So without further ado, welcome Lauren and David, and we'll probably start with Lauren and get going.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and get the presentation up here. Present. And can you guys just give me a thumbs up that you can see the presentation, everyone that's watching? Sweet, okay. We did it, Alicia, step 2. We got this part up, okay. And you know, I know Alicia said thank you, but you know, David and I also thank you for jumping on and hearing what we have to say. Everyone else out there is busy too. And so it's awesome to see all these people taking time out of their day to join us and hear everything that we have to say. So I'm actually gonna have David introduce himself first, and then I'll go from there.
Everybody, thank you so much. Obviously, my name is David Thorn. I live in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of this chat and share my personal story and my journey from lots of stress and agony, from depigmentation to re-pigmentation. So I'm happy to be here, and I will warn everyone, I'm actually streaming from my winery. I just finished a 200-person wedding event moments before I walked in here, so if I'm all sweaty looking, that's why. And if there's noise in the background, I apologize. That's people coming in for dinner service and another wedding. So I'm looking forward to speaking with everybody, and thank you so much for your time, because I know how valuable it is.
Great. And I am Lauren Schultheis. I am a registered dietitian. I'm a certified health coach. I'm also a student right now of the Integrated and Functional Nutrition Academy. We happen to be recovering gut health right now. So this is very timely, as we're going to talk actually quite a bit about gut health today. I've been doing this for just over 11 years. I was at a large company for 9 of those years. Then I had triplets, so that was fun. And then after that, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, also super fun. So after all of that, my husband and I, we made a decision there's a lot of things that happened, but we ended up actually just kind of starting our own thing. So we have a larger company, and then E Squared Health is a subsidiary of our parent company. And actually a client of mine knows Alicia and connected us to say, hey, I know Alicia's looking for someone to come on and talk to our whole community about nutrition and health, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. So I was super flattered to be chosen to do this. And I'm really excited to share a lot of this information with you guys today. It sounds like this might be one of the first years that nutrition is covered. So I just think this is such a great opportunity. And again, I just like really appreciate being a part of it. On a personal note, as I mentioned, I'm a triplet mom. I actually have 3 stepchildren as well. So for all of you who are out there that have kids and busy lifestyles, know that I get it. And when, you know, nutrition can feel overwhelming at times, like, hey, how the heck am I going to make changes? I'm busy, I work, I have kids, but I'm right there with you. And I'm here to support that as well. And also I'm a wine enthusiast. So by no means think that I sit here in my house and only eat celery and drink water. I love pizza. I love to drink wine, and I love to indulge sometimes too. So know that I'm also a real person. All right. So the way that this is going to go today is I'm going to actually, we're going to actually listen to David for a few minutes up front here, share his story. And I've heard it now twice in prepping for today, and it's incredible. And I'm sure everybody on here has incredible stories as well, just around what they've been through and this whole condition and how it's impacted your life. So David's going to share his story from a, you know, kind of here's what happened. And here's how I resolved things. And then we're going to re-go through the story, but I'm going to share the science behind his whole story and what likely led to his vitiligo diagnosis and resolution of it. And then we'll shift gears and talk about, okay, so this is all great. And I'm super thrilled for David, but like, what can I do? What can I do to make an impact on my health and wellness? So we're going to spend the second half of this whole presentation going through that. And then I'm going to share a little bit about E-Squared Health, just, you know, how we could potentially be a resource for you if, you know, if possible. And I know we started a few minutes late, and Alicia, we were planning on doing like 45 minutes of content and then Q&A, right?
Yeah.
So for anyone who can't stay on that long, I did just throw my email and our website on here. So if you have questions and you're just like not able to stay on the whole time today, please jot that down. Alicia can also get you my information, but I really want to make sure all of your questions are answered if they, you know, especially if you aren't able to answer them, get them asked today. All right. Okay. Let's jump in. So we are going to start with David's, and David, I'll run the slides for you, but let me know if I need to go back a slide for any reason.
All right. So I'm going to warn you, I haven't seen the slides yet either. So we're going to do this together. So I think it should be pretty easy. So you want me to start?
Let's go for it.
All right. So I guess the first thing that I want to say just to all of you is that no matter what you do in terms of your nutrition, and what I can tell you is that if you eat better, you're going to feel better, regardless of whether you repigment or not. And so I don't want to create some false promise to anyone that if you do what I do, you're going to repigment. This is my story, and it's really worked for me. So I think it's an important thing to say up front, because I don't want to, I don't want to be that person that makes a promise that that this may or may not work. But I can tell you from other issues that I was having, those things resolved as well. And so I'll just start with telling you a little bit about who I am and where I come from and my background, because I think it does tell an interesting story. So I grew up in a farm community in a very, very humble way. I have 2 older brothers, and there was a big age difference between my middle brother and myself. And so just, you know, there's always family dynamics are interesting. And my family dynamic was quite interesting, where there was a lot of pressure put on me to be the chosen one in terms of being successful, and just sort of towing the line in a level of perfection. So my mom, she was physically beautiful, and she put a lot of pressure on what we looked like, how we presented ourselves to the community. And my father was like a very strict person who was a sports guy, and I was into sports. So there was a level of perfectionism that was expected from him in the sports area. And so there was just growing up, just an intense amount of pressure on me from a very young age. And when I was going through my story with Lauren, there were some things that I forgot that I went through until I sort of shared with her sort of some, I think, patterns that occurred early on that sort of feed into this whole autoimmune thing that has become my reality as an adult. So early on, as long as I could remember as a young boy, I had stomach issues from when I could remember. I grew up on this dairy farm and we grew our own crops, and things were very humble. So whatever was put in front of us, we were required to eat because there weren't other options. So whatever was in season during that time period of the year is what we ate, which in theory sounds like what we want people to do. But, you know, this was, I was born in 65. So this was, you know, 60s, 70s, and 80s when a lot of crops were dusted with insecticides and pesticides. And so I remember very early on, our family garden was located very close to the soybean field. And if you know anything about farming, soybeans get sprayed a lot for pesticides. And I remember vividly, it was my job to pick beans and tomatoes out of the garden at a very young age. And I remember my uncle or my father spraying the fields, and there would just be this dust of pesticide or herbicide put on the fields that would be blowing in the air across the crops that we were putting on our table at night. And they, you know, sometimes got washed and sometimes they didn't. If I was in the garden and I was hungry for something, I just eat it out of the garden because that's just, you know, the way we grew up. But also along the lines of, you know, childhood, this stomach issue was constantly an issue for me. So I always was bloated. I never really was overweight, but my stomach would get distended with just, you know, the smallest amounts of food. I was drinking whole milk that we would get from the barn. Sometimes it was pasteurized and sometimes it wasn't. And I was, you know, eating these fresh vegetables. So in concept, it seems like I was doing all the right things. But the other piece of this stomach issue that was going on was I had a skin issue early on where I would get these little bumps under my skin. It was a very embarrassing thing as a young boy. My skin would peel from my fingertips down to my wrist on both sides of my hand to a point at which it would bleed. And in all the school pictures, my hands were always wrapped. And so it's something that was like a painful thing growing up because people would tease me about these bandages. When I played sports, you know, I'd try to catch the football or throw the baseball and there would be blood because it was just a very sensitive thing. Oddly enough, as I matured and probably puberty hit, my skin issues on my hands sort of resolved. But I think there was something going on with, you know, self-esteem. And it wasn't until I got into junior high and high school that I built more confidence because I was in sports and I was getting accolades through that maybe lessened my stress, you know, internal stress that I was feeling from family. I was able to release some of those stresses through exercise and, you know, sports. But, you know, as a teenager, I had a lot of acne, really bad acne, to a point at which, you know, my mom hated it because I had these big, you know, red spots all over my face. So every Friday I would go to this dermatologist where they would perform what they would call acne surgery, where they would, you know, pop the acne and try to extract the stuff from my face. And it was like a whole weekend thing. I could never have plans because my face was like a bloody mess from Friday. And we would get the last appointment on Friday. And so I would have this, you know, horrible looking face until well into the following week. And so, but it was this vicious cycle of acne treatments and on antibiotics. And then when I was also growing up, we grew up in a dairy farm, as I mentioned, and there was one pediatrician and he was a general practitioner in town, and his name was Dr. Wade. He was a very good family friend. But no matter what we did for visits to him. If we had a toothache or if we broke our arm, the remedy was always the same, which was a shot of penicillin, which sounds crazy, but no matter what, you got a shot. If you went in for a physical, you got a shot. It was crazy. And, you know, as an adult person looking back on it, I'm like, why would my parents allow that? But they didn't know any better. And it was just, you know, my parents grew up in the age of doctors know all, and you can't question anything, and you just abide by what the doctor says. And he was certainly a great human being. It was just how he was trained as a doctor. So I'm not really criticizing him. It was just the time period in our lives where there were certain rituals done in medicine, and I happened to fall in that category of those rituals. And so I constantly had antibiotics in my body, and I constantly had stress. So those are some themes. And I was constantly eating foods that were penetrated with, you know, poisons and toxins that I thought were good for me. So fast forwarding it, you know, I get through sort of my acne years. I'm off to college, and I join a fraternity, and I sort of do that whole thing. And again, sort of lots of pressure to perform. My father wanted me to be a doctor. I chose not to do that. And so from his eyes, I was on my own moving forward. So I had to find a way to put myself through college. And so, you know, I'll summarize it quick. I got a full ride through some scholarship applications that was based on merit. And so during that time, I was required to have a 3.8 or above to keep my full ride scholarship. And there was only one of these scholarships given in the University at Bowling Green where I studied. So it was like 1 out of 17,000 students got the scholarship, and I got it. And so there was just an enormous amount of pressure there. So there's this, you know, overriding theme here of pressure and perfectionism. And so it wasn't until, you know, I got married and started building my family did I really start trying to figure out why my stomach was bothering me all these years, and why my joints were hurting, and, you know, just trying to find answers. And through years and years of going to doctors, it ended up, you know, I ended up getting the diagnosis of having lupus. And so the type of lupus that's joint related, the systemic type. And so immediately the doctors then put me on high doses of steroids, which also is just another layer of, you know, things in my body that that was bothering my stomach and gut. All the while, it seemed like my stomach issues were getting worse, and my joint pain maybe lessened a little bit, but I ballooned up from the steroids, not really from weight, but just bloating and that water buildup. And so at that point, I'm like, I was just absolutely physically miserable. And so I went off all the medications that I was on, and I started working out religiously. So I was on this mission to just get physically fit. So I lost a lot of body fat and was working out 6 and 7 days a week, and but still eating gluten and dairy and whole milk, and I was feeling a little better with things, but still not 100%. And then, so I was maneuvering through that sort of time period. And at that point, my mom became very ill, and my mom and I were very close growing up. She was sort of like the anchor in the family. She was the balanced one out of a lot of dysfunction. And so I ended up being selected to be her power of attorney and caregiver. And I'm, as I said, the youngest. So being that chosen one caused a lot of drama in my family, with my father, who still is alive today, with my older brothers, who would have been the natural second choice. But, you know, so from that experience, it was just a lot of pressure from my family. And then just watching someone that I loved and cared for die was just incredibly painful. So I'm a type, you know, AAA type personality, and I figure stuff out. So when my mom was diagnosed, I was going to get her best care. And fortunately, through my client contacts, I was able to get her into the absolute best care that she possibly could have. But that didn't stop her from dying. So my mission during her 9 months of diagnosis was to make her care be amazing. And that I held up, and she lived the best 9 months that I could give her. She had a private suite in, UH hospitals, and she was really treated like royalty. But it wasn't until I was in the hospital did the very first spot of vitiligo appear. And it was in the middle of the night when the doctors made the rounds. The bright lights were turned on. I was holding her hand in bed, and this little tiny white spot appeared on my hand. And at that moment, I'm like, well, that's a little weird, but I'll deal with this. It's just a little spot. I'm sure it's some kind of thing that I can get cream for and it'll go away, but I've got more important things to deal with. And so I didn't really put a lot of credence into it, and I just continued to make her my priority. And all the while, I'm raising two sons that are in high school, and I have 2 full businesses at the same time. So I have a landscape architecture business, a very busy winery and event center, and a restaurant. And so, that business alone, it's 3 businesses in one. And then I am a landscape architect. I travel all over the country designing beautiful landscapes for high-end clients that expect perfection. And so while all this is going on, I'm, living at the hospital and caring for my dying mom. And so my mom ends up passing in June. And I think the first spot appeared sometime, I'm going to say, it's hard to completely remember, but I'm going to say March or April is when I noticed it. And by the time she passed on June 17th, Father's Day, ironically, my hands were highly affected. And so I went to the doctor at that point, and he said, oh, without seconds, he's like, oh, this is vitiligo. And he said, well, you can get some light treatment, but for hands, it's very difficult to treat, but you can try it. And he was just sort of poo-pooed any hope that that there was in getting rid of these white spots. And so what you can't tell, I'm Caucasian, but I get very, very dark. I get tan in an instant. So it was very evident in June that, there was a lot going on. And, as I went through this time period, it just kept getting worse and worse. It's starting to spread, went all over my genitals, and like within weeks. And then it was starting to cover all my legs, my back, my chest. It was just spreading. And so, from that time period of getting the first diagnosis, I started going to many other doctors, and I really got the same sort of answer from everyone, which was basically, you can try these things, but don't expect a lot of progress. So I went through the light therapy route, and oddly for me, when I did the light therapy, as soon as I stopped my hands, it just got worse. And I was paying for it out of my pocket. It became a very expensive thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to just resolve the fact that my hands are going to be white. I'm good with that. And then I'm like, well, okay, I'm okay if it spreads to my genitals, because no one really sees it except my special person. And then, okay, it's going to go to my legs. So I kept accepting this, but I said a prayer one night, and I'm like, okay, Lord, just take everything except my face. Just don't go on my face. And literally the next day I woke up, it was like clockwork. The first spot appeared on the tip of my nose. And so this picture that's up, that's really after I started repigmenting. So it was worse, but I didn't really document it because I was really struggling with having my picture taken. So it was probably another 30% worse. And so this was sort of midstream of starting to make improvement. So these are just the only pictures that I do have of that. And so what I ended up doing was problem solving on my own. I started sort of saying, okay, Dave, I got to figure this out. And so I started calming myself through meditation and exercising. And it wasn't until I could be calm enough to just sort of be within my body did I start connecting the dots of my life and connecting the dots of maybe what is my answer is that the stress induced sort of life that I was living pretty much my whole life, along with the foods that I was eating, maybe was the cause of my issue. So I went to the Cleveland Clinic through the functional medicine department. I went to under the practice of Mark Hyman, who, if you write his name down, he's got some remarkable books, and he's pretty much a guru in this functional medicine world. And through that journey and meeting the first doctor, I just said to the doctor, this is what I want. I don't know if I'm going to find the solution, but I want to be tested for everything under the sun that I might be allergic to, that I might be sensitive to, that I might be deficient in, and that I might need to take vitamins for. And so I literally had probably 75 vials of blood taken, and it was sent off to different labs all over the country. And through that process, I discovered, even though I grew up on a dairy farm, I'm highly allergic to cow's milk. And so I was feeding my body with milk that was really bad for me my whole life. So I was highly allergic to the casein in cow's milk. To this day, I can do goat milk and sheep milk, but I can't do cow's milk. And I'm celiac. So all these homemade breads that my mom made my whole life, and all the recipes that we made, I was allergic to. And so those two main things, in that day when I found this out, I went cold turkey on. I just stopped. And I'm like one of those people, like, if I have a plan, I'm going to do the plan. Just give me the plan and I'm going to do it. And so I just got hyper focused on that. And then I'm like, okay, what other foods might be causing problems? So I did this complete detox from my body of all foods. And I started adding foods back in that were very basic. So proteins like fish and chicken, but mainly chicken, boiled chicken with nothing on it. And I started adding back into my diet things that I would test. I do chicken, and then it would be a vegetable, and it was this slow process. And I was working with a dietitian at the clinic at the same time, who was helping me sort of earmark foods that were probably safe to try and things that I would completely stay away from. And I had never even heard of things like nightshade vegetables or anything like that. And my focus was really on inflammation-based foods. What is causing inflammation? Because we know that vitiligo is an inflammation-based disease. So what foods could I be feeding myself that could be causing this inflammation? So, and then through that process, I also found out that I had a lot of heavy metals in my body. And so I went so far as I had high levels of mercury in my body. So I had some old caps filled in my teeth with cavities that had mercury. So I had those removed, and I had the synthetic fillings put in. And then I drank this collated drink that was not good to taste. And I got the option of a 1 month or a 3 month. And the doctor said the 3 month would be better because it would pull these metals from my body. And it was crazy. I would drink this stuff in the morning, and by 10 o'clock I would urinate, and I could literally smell the metal coming from my body. So it was insane. And after I started doing that, and after I started removing these foods that were making me sick, I was like a new human being. I could think clear. My stomach, that even though I had a 4-pack, but I couldn't get the bottom 6-pack to go because I had this bloating. Within literally a week, I had a 6-pack that I'd worked for years to get. And so, there's a vanity thing, but way more than that, it was how I was feeling inside. And I could actually go to the bathroom, and this is going to be very personal, but I had never had a bowel movement for as long as I could remember that was solid. And it wasn't until I did this did I have a real bowel movement, and I didn't even really know what that meant. So it sounds incredibly crazy and stupid, but when your norm is dysfunction and sickness, it's all you know, right? And so I just immediately, within a week or two, started feeling better in my stomach. And that's what I referenced when I said early on, when I said, I can't tell you you're going to feel better. But if you have stomach issues or bowel movement issues or joint issues, I used to not be able to do this. I couldn't touch the back of my hand. My joints were so swollen that I couldn't bend my fingers. I would try to put my shoes on, and I literally would, like, tears would come to my eyes in the morning because my joints hurt so bad. So through this sort of exercise of removing all these things from my body, I was able to feel so much better on all these other things. So I completely went off, zero medications, and where things are today are, my hands are the very last thing, and I don't know if you can see, but even my hands are repigmenting. A year ago, my hands were white from here to my fingertips. And even my fingertips, I don't know if you can tell if you can see, but this part is about 50% repigmented now. And if you look at old images, and I don't know, Lauren, if you have any of those, but my hands were white from here, from my fingertips down. And so, and my legs, I had 60% of my legs. I'm 99.9% repigmented on my legs. And basically the last to repigment are my hands. And so, and it's continuing every day to fill in. I'm watching it daily. And so I haven't seen some clients in 6 months, and they have said, wow, your hands, they thought they were getting worse because it's more obvious because I'm speckled now than having a solid white. So it's definitely noticeable. And so that's my story. So.
Thank you. And every time I hear it, I'm just like, wow, like it's an incredible story. And I apologize, one sec, I gotta let my dog go out of the office. Hold on here.
So I'm sorry for rambling, folks. It's hard to summarize your life in, in 10 minutes. So.
Well, thank you. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to essentially go back through that at a much faster pace, but I want to point out some really important things around his story and setting the stage for, why did all of this happen? And then how did what Dave did to repigment, how did it work and why did it work? And then again, what can you take from that to take steps, not only just to improve your health, but to see, if repigmentation is possible. But to set the stage for that, just a few things, I would like what we would call like table stakes, right? Like some things I just want to throw out there so everyone has the right mindset going into this. And one is that we know that vitiligo is an autoimmune disorder. And there are, actually autoimmune diseases and conditions are one of the fastest growing things in our country. The treatments are extremely expensive for all of them. People spend the most money on autoimmune medications. But we know that a lot of it stems from the gut. And you may or may not know this, but 80% of your immune system actually resides in your gut, in your small intestines. And so taking care of our gut is extremely important, not just for general health, but even more so if you have an autoimmune condition. The second thing is, I heard this in a seminar once, and I just was like, that it was like the perfect statement is that your skin is the reflecting pool of your gut. I have not struggled with vitiligo, so I cannot personally say how it would feel to be dealing with that, but I have dealt over the years with a lot of eczema, psoriasis on my face, on my skin, having those feelings of embarrassment. As you heard David's story, he struggled with acne. So at the end of the day, if you have toxicity that your body can't deal with, it's going to come out in some way, shape, or form. And so for a lot of us, it comes through the skin. Additionally, we know that people who have one autoimmune diagnosis are likely to have others. So again, if you look back at Dave's story, he had a lupus diagnosis, then the vitiligo diagnosis, and then the celiac diagnosis. But I'm guessing, just from an educational perspective, he probably had underlying celiac for years and years and years, which could have actually set the stage for then the lupus and the vitiligo diagnosis down the road. Also, number 4, we always hear you are what you eat. And I want us to rethink that. It's not you are what you eat, it's you are what you can digest and absorb. And so it's really, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but nutrient deficiencies are extremely common in vitiligo. So the interesting thing is if you're eating really healthy foods, but you can't absorb them, that's a problem too. So again, taking care of our gut is so crucial for our overall wellness. And then also thinking about resolving the root cause. And with vitiligo, I know some of the treatments that some of you may or may not have tried around light therapies, maybe experimental medications, creams, that type of thing. Those are all symptom management. And for, in the moment, you're like, yes, give me something to change these symptoms because this really stinks. But from a functional perspective and from a holistic perspective, we really have to think about root cause and start to ask ourselves, why? Why do I have vitiligo? Why is my skin doing this? And starting to get to the root cause, which is, fortunately what David was able to figure out is the root cause of why this all occurred in the first place. So we're going to go through a little bit of gut health 101. And some of the old school thoughts around gut health is people saying, and guys, I've been doing this for a long time. I talk about poop like literally every day of my life. And I have tons of people who come into my office and they're like, yeah, gut health. Like, I'm good. I poop every morning. I head into the office. I'm good. And I'm like, yeah, I wish it were that simple. So one thing we need to know is, gut health goes far beyond our GI. In fact, your gut health can impact your mental health, anxiety and depression. It can lead to ADD and ADHD, skin irritations, like we talked about, eczema, psoriasis, acne, vitiligo. It can also lead to PCOS in women. It can lead to neurodegenerative diseases. So again, like our gut it's a lot bigger than just our digestion. Another common thought is like, well, I don't have celiac. And I don't have food allergies. So, I'm fine eating whatever I want. And again, it's not that simple. And we'll talk a little bit more about the difference between an allergy and a sensitivity. And more importantly, how do I figure out if I have these sensitivities and are there foods I shouldn't be eating? And then again, that symptom management. So again, doing this for as long as I've done this, I have a lot of people that have, gastric reflux or acid reflux, and they've been on some sort of like acid inhibiting medication, which are designed to be for 6 weeks. They've been on them for 5-10 years. And it's not just those, it's Tums, it's all sorts of different things, allergies, depression. Again, this is all managing the symptom, but it's not getting to the root cause. And so the approach that we take at E Squared and that I take with my clients is we look at all the possible symptoms that could indicate intestinal permeability. We assess. We do not just guess, oh, it could be this, it could be that. We want to say, well, let's get some data so that you can feel more confident in what your plan and what your approach is. And again, we want to look to address root cause so we can do our best to alleviate the symptoms versus just mask the symptoms. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what your gut is. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but it's really important to understand that like your gut is not just like this hollow tube that runs through your body. When you think about, for example, eating an orange, let's take an orange for as a quick example. Everyone knows when you eat an orange, there's vitamin C, right? Like, yes, get vitamin C in, but then you have to ask yourself, well, how does the vitamin C get from the orange like into my body to use it? And the answer is in your gut. So what we eat goes through our mouth, goes into our stomach, it's mixed with a bunch of stuff, and it's sent into our small intestine and our large intestine. So what you're seeing here, the orange, those are the cells of your small intestine. And then the red below it is your bloodstream. And so there's a physical connection between your gut lining and your bloodstream. So that is where nutrients come from our food and go into our bloodstream. But ideally our small intestine, these orange little cells, they're our barrier, they're our defense against toxins, environmental toxins, pesticides, herbicides, just things that shouldn't be in our body. But if there's a breakdown in that defense mechanism, not only do nutrients go into your bloodstream, but toxins go into your bloodstream. And that can be a massive variety of things. That can be, as you can see up here, microorganisms, bacteria, toxins. It can be herbicides, pesticides, and it can also be whole food proteins. So you could eat something and it doesn't get completely digested. So it goes into your bloodstream and then it triggers your immune system. And then every time you eat that food, the alarm system is going off in your body. All the while you're just thinking, gosh, like I thought dairy was healthy, or I thought whatever food was healthy. Whereas kind of below the surface, your body has tagged it as an invader. So it's important to know that, again, taking care of our gut is taking care of our health. Those two things go hand in hand. So if we start to now think about everything that David shared with us. So I know he shared a lot, but I wanted to point out a few things. One, he mentioned the penicillin. So antibiotics, every time you take one, it wipes out your gut microbiota and you're starting over and you're starting over. And so if you think about it, especially when we're young, for example, when you're teeny tiny, if you were someone who had a ton of ear infections, you had strep throat, you were probably someone that was on a ton of antibiotics. And so your poor little gut, even as a little person, was being wiped out again and again and again. And that even alone can set the stage for autoimmune conditions. Also, being a C-section baby versus being a vaginal birth, that can even set the stage for autoimmune conditions. I had triplets and they had to be C-section. And so I've gone above and beyond to make sure that they were taking probiotics, like literally the moment that they could, eating healthy foods, because I knew that they were going to be at a higher risk for immune dysfunction because they were C-section. And then we think about, what Dave said around what he thought was healthy foods. He was being exposed to herbicides and pesticides literally on a daily basis. And so, I'm sure we all have heard the term organic and, I should maybe think about buying organic. But the truth is, there are some fruits and vegetables that are still extremely heavily sprayed with pesticides and herbicides. And every time you eat them, it's these micro exposures to things that could be breaking down this gut lining and causing an immune response. Additionally, as you could, hear from David, a lot of mental and emotional stress, and that mental and emotional stress can have just as much of an impact on our gut and on our health as eating a food that we're sensitive to. So again, when we start to look big picture, it's like, gosh, no wonder you ended up with all this stuff, like with everything, all of these insults to your gut and to your body from a very young age. And he had those signs and symptoms there. But again, as a young kid, what's he going to do? When you're a teenager, you're told what? Acne's normal. It's your hormones. Well, acne could be normal to a point, but we also need to look at it in the grand scheme of things. And then, as you think about, as he was going on in life, he was continuing to eat these so-called healthy foods, but his GI symptoms were not getting any better. In fact, they were getting worse, but that was his normal. And I just did I go live on Facebook every Friday. And one of the things I went live on this last Friday was to stop ignoring the symptoms that you have just kind of told yourself, well, this is just the way it is. I just have headaches. I just have migraines. I just have a bad period. I just can't lose weight. I just fill in the blank. There's a gajillion things out there that are common, but guys, they're not normal. And so no, you have to advocate for yourself to say, hey, I don't feel 100%. I need to figure out what else is going on. So anyway, my point in that is he had all of these symptoms, but it was just his normal, and he didn't know any better until literally later in his adult life. And he was like, oh, this is what it feels like to poop normally. I never knew because I just was never able to do that. So, he had these autoimmune diagnoses, the lupus. We know that, okay, yes, his body was starting to attack itself. Not good, right? But in that case, it was attacking his joints, whereas the vitiligo is attacking, the pigmentation cells. Then he had this massive trigger which a lot of people who have autoimmune conditions can, when they sit back and think about it, they're like, yep, I can think of like that one thing that happened where it got way worse. This really stressful event. And so again, for him, that was where the vitiligo started to appear and got worse and worse and worse. And then we've talked about the third diagnosis of the celiac as well. And I just wanted to point out with the celiac, I don't know how familiar you guys are with this, but you know, normally your intestine has like these long finger-like projections. And then on each of these long finger-like projections is actually these little guys, the little orange cells. And then that's where the actual absorption takes place. Well, in celiac, it flattens. So where you should have all of these absorption sites for all of your vitamin C and your proteins and all of these awesome nutrients, his were flat, as you can see on the right. So again, my gut, no pun intended, says that he probably had celiac a long time before the lupus and before the vitiligo, but because of the celiac, he wasn't able to absorb nutrients. So then he started this nutrient deficiency, and that, you know, started to become deficient in certain nutrients. In the meantime, heavy metals are building up, which then basically led to this complete freak out of his immune system that's like, okay, like hands in the air, I'm done, right? And just shut down. So, and you know, with vitiligo, I know there can be a lot of nutrient deficiencies, but these can be some of the most common. So again, thinking about you are what you can digest and absorb, you know, we'll talk more about this, but like, have you ever, or when's the last time you had these things checked? Here in Minnesota, and everyone that's on this is from Minnesota, guys, like you have to have your vitamin D checked every year because like we live inside, and when you go outside, you probably put sunscreen on. So we aren't getting the vitamin D. In fact, I have clients down in Florida, and they're vitamin D deficient. Like we have to, you know, recognize that their vitamin deficiencies are a real thing. And so it's better to know, and at least know, even if you're not, at least check the box and rule those things out than sitting around and wondering, well, could I have vitamin D deficiency? Do I have a B12 deficiency? And so what's really cool about David's story is first, the fact that he just advocated for himself and walked in and said, I'm not going to ask you what I think I should do. I'm going to tell you, I want this all checked. I want this all checked. And through that process was able to find out exactly what he said. What am I allergic to? What am I sensitive to? And what nutrients am I missing? And as he replenished those things and restored his health, his body responded. And guys, our bodies are an amazing machine. They are these amazing things that can, you know, have these tight regulations to keep us alive and keep us functioning. Everyone's body is capable of being at 100%. But again, we have to start to think about root cause. Well, why is my body not at 100%? And so what I wanted to talk through with you guys is what we would actually consider a gut healing protocol. But even if you can also just look at it as a wellness protocol. Hey, if I'm looking to make changes, I want to, not only do I want my re-pigmentation, yes, that would be amazing. I want to feel better. I want to have more energy. I want to lose body fat. I want to be the best version of myself. This protocol works just the same. So there's 5 steps. It's called the 5 R's: remove, replace, re-inoculate, repair, and rebalance. All right. So I'm going to briefly go through these things. And obviously, if you guys have questions, start writing them down so we can have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So the first thing we're going to do, Alicia's like, I got it. So the first thing we want to do is look at what can we remove. So there's a few slides on what to remove. So the first thing is unhealthy foods. And on this slide, you're not even necessarily seeing food sensitivities, but guys, like most of you know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. America sucks at being healthy. Like we're just not good at it. We have bad food in our food supply. We have poor regulation of what can go into our food. The ingredients that are allowed in our food are embarrassing. So we have to take it upon ourselves to say, you know what? I can't just trust that when I go to the grocery store that General Mills is pumping out the best quality food. I need to start to look at ingredients. I need to start to look at what's in the food I'm eating versus worrying about the calories or the fat grams. None of that stuff matters if it's not a good quality food. So what I listed here are some good starting places of like, hey, I don't have a good example here, but when I pick up a food, I'm going to first look at that ingredient list. And if it's on this list that Lauren put up in this seminar, I'm not buying it. It is not going in my cart, right? Out of sight, out of mind, right? We got to set ourselves up for success at home. So things like high fructose corn syrup, trans fats, nitrates and nitrites, food colorings, artificial sweeteners, all of these things can cause those insults to our gut lining. And as David mentioned, cause that inflammation. Inflammation is really a root cause of a lot of things that we experience in our health. Next, we want to look at removing foods you're sensitive to. Now, this can be really tricky. The most common are going to be what I have listed here. Now, if you're someone who's like, well, Lauren, I tried going gluten-free for a couple of weeks and it didn't do anything. I would really challenge you to kind of think about doing it again, but what I would call going all in. Like 2 weeks, if you have celiac, 2 weeks isn't going to do much for you, or if you have food sensitivities, we're looking at more like an 8 to 12 week period. And we need to be 100%, not 80%, not 90%, 100%. And again, the foods that I have listed here, these are the foods that people are most likely to be sensitive to. We do food sensitivity testing at the studio, at our wellness studio. We use ALA test that's listed down here. And just in the past month, I've probably done 20 food sensitivity reviews. And these are the things that I'm seeing all the time. And what's crazy is it's like, well, eggs, I thought eggs were so healthy. Eggs are healthy, but they're not always right for you in the moment. And they might be more so pouring gasoline on a fire than helping you put the fire out. So that's one of the advantages to testing and to diagnostics is to stop guessing what it could be and get the data. The other thing we want to remove are environmental toxins. So for all of you lovely ladies out there who are spraying on the perfume every day and you're going to Bath and Body Works to get the lotions, guys, the fragrances that we put on can be highly toxic. When we look at the ingredients, again, just even in our products, our shampoos, our lotions, the candles that we're burning. So it's really important to take a step back and look at our environment and to say, hey, like, do I have a clean environment? And additionally, the pesticides and herbicides, that's one of the reasons why we do recommend trying to eat organic produce. I also get it in having 6 kids, like, money doesn't grow on trees. Mama can't buy organic everything. So that's why there are lists like the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen to help you learn how to prioritize, to say, well, hey, when I go to the grocery store, what are some of the foods, Lauren, that you'd suggest I for sure buy organic? And starting with that Dirty Dozen list is a great list to start with, because those are going to be the 12 foods that are most likely to be contaminated with herbicides and pesticides. And then removing the mental and emotional stress. And guys, like, we're in COVID times, like, our world is crazy right now, right? So you have to look at what's within your control. One of the things is, how do you talk to yourself? What do you say to yourself every day in the morning? How do you pick yourself up? How do you boost yourself up? And then do you have toxic relationships at work, in your personal life, with your family? And it might not be realistic to end that relationship, but how do you work to improve it? Because again, that mental and emotional stress, our body doesn't know the difference between food stress or work stress or financial stress or mental stress. It just views it all as stress. And so removing those stressors and reducing them is going to help you to feel a lot better. So that's step 1, removal. At the same time, we look at step 2, which is replace. I feel like this is a little bit cliche for me to say eat fruits and vegetables, but like, people say it all the time for a reason, because vegetables are like one of the biggest keys to your health. Getting in nutrient dense foods, quality proteins, anti-inflammatory fats like avocados and walnuts and wild salmon. So how do we get nutrient dense foods in? And then also in our lifestyle, how do we have therapeutic movement? If you don't like to run, don't run. There are other ways to exercise. If you hate yoga, don't do yoga. if you hate it. All right. So there are a gajillion ways you can move your body. And one of the things that we do is we help our clients not just find what helps them lose weight, it's what helps them feel good. What do they like? What kind of exercise do they look forward to every day? And that's just as important as finding things that are effective for weight loss. You know, and I want to say it here, like if one more person says, well, don't I need to do cardio to lose weight? No, you don't. All right. There are a lot of ways to exercise to help you lose weight. And in fact, your nutrition is going to be 80% of the battle anyway. Exercise is just icing on the cake, the gluten-free cake, right? Okay. So then we have sleep. All right. So I compare sleep to vegetables. You need 6 to 8 handfuls of vegetables every day, and you need 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night. If you are a parent, there's only so much you can do, and you're going to get woken up in the middle of the night. That is life. So it's like, how do we try to optimize your sleep around that? But if you don't have kids at home, your dog does not count. Your dog should not be sleeping in your bed if it is waking you up. You need your sleep to be a good dog parent. All right. So you got to look at how do we optimize our ability to get a good night's sleep? And then also, how do we start getting that digestive support in? There's a lot of different ways that you can supplement to support your gut. I just listed a few things here. Again, this is what we would work on with you one-on-one to say, like, where should we start? You know, for example, if you've been on some sort of like acid reducer for years, we might need to look at, you know, how do we get your body to actually produce more acid, which I know sounds crazy, but if you don't have enough acid, bacteria can grow in your small intestine where it shouldn't be and like make things way worse than better. We might need to look at omega fats to get that inflammation down, but you know, that's where we have to look at you and get the data and then personalize your recommendations. Step 3 is re-inoculate. So how do we get that good bacteria? So for example, let's say you've been on, in fact, my mom just called me and she's like, I have this weird thing on my hand. Like my doctor put me on an antibiotic. I'm like, great. So she's going to take it, but I'm like, you need to pump yourself full of probiotics every day. You need to, you know, go to the grocery store, get some sauerkraut. You need to get some organic yogurt. Like you need to get those probiotics back in your body because remember the antibiotics wipe out everything. So as we look at re-inoculating and getting the good bacteria going, things like fermented foods, kimchi, again, sauerkraut, there's a bunch of them out there, and resistant starches. I can share what that is, you know, in the Q&A, but looking at how do we start to get those good bugs up and running. Step 4 is repair. So remember, I'm not going to scroll all the way back, but remember the image of the gut lining and all the little peach cells. And then you could see where there was like that breakdown in the gut lining. We got to heal and seal. All right. We need to heal and seal and get those junctions looking like this back to looking like this, that tight defense barrier in our body. And so we want to do that by replenishing those nutrient deficiencies. So first test, find out what you might be low in, and then get those nutrients back in the body. But you can't do that unless you first removed the foods that are causing the breakdown in the first place. So that's why we don't just say, hey, go start taking a bunch of vitamin D. Well, if your gut isn't healthy, you can't absorb it anyway. So we've got to go through the repair process and then, the remove process. And then we go to the repair process when your body's actually ready. And then we start looking at making sure we're eating anti-inflammatory foods on a regular basis. You can do a Google search for them. You know, it's not hard to find the list. What can be hard is, well, how do I actually like get them in my diet? Well, how do I make that work for me? I don't like blueberries. Okay, you don't have to eat blueberries, but we need to look at all the options for anti-inflammatory foods and start to think about, well, what's going to work for you in your day-to-day. And then the step 5 is, rebalance, which another way of thinking about this is just finding your new normal. A lot of the clients that we work with, they come in and they just know, like, I don't feel good. I don't like where things are at. So we have to do a lot of work and a lot of digging. And sometimes it requires making a lot of significant changes. And then eventually we kind of settle out somewhere in between and they find their new normal and say, hey, maybe I had a food sensitivity and I needed to cut it out for 6 months. I'm actually a good example of that. I had terrible food sensitivities. I had to cut out corn and dairy and yeast and alcohol. That really sucked. I couldn't have wine, like all these great foods. And now I can have them but not all the time. I found my new normal of what works for me. And if I have a piece of pizza and then the next day I have a piece of cake, my skin's going to break out. So I have to know what's normal for me. And that's food wise, that's stress management wise, that's relationships, it's time management, it's finding that new, when you say you want a healthier lifestyle, that's what step 5 is how do I find this new normal? All right, so diagnostics, a really important piece of this whole journey is finding out, well, what is it that I need to be testing? And there's a lot of options out there. That's why there are experts like me and a lot of great experts out there that can say, hey, let's help you figure out what diagnostics might be appropriate for you. That can be everything from food allergy testing to food sensitivity testing. Yes, those are 2 different things. Looking at nutrient deficiencies, looking at heavy metals, looking at stress. Maybe we, do some assessing around your cortisol levels. Do you have SIBO? SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It is so common, and it's typically triggered by H. pylori, which is an infection in your gut that's not life-threatening, but like super annoying and causes these other problems. Hormonal dysregulation. Ladies, if you're someone who has terrible periods, that is not normal. If you need to take a painkiller for your headaches or your cramps, that is not normal. So we need to look at what else is dysregulated right now. And then you can also test for dysbiosis. You can actually, did you know you can actually do a stool sample and you can look at how the spectrum of the different types of probiotics that you have in your body. That's another way to see like, well, what do I have and what am I potentially missing? Okay, so that was a lot. I know we're over on time, but I'm just going to keep on rolling. And if you have to log off, you can come back and watch this on the live later. So that's a lot, right? And that's a lot of steps. That's a lot of things to think about. What I wanted to wrap with today is just a little bit higher level look at nutrition and some other starting places that if you're not interested in doing testing right now, you're not interested in coming into work with somebody, you're not interested in, the 5R protocol, it doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. It doesn't mean there aren't things you can change. And as David mentioned and Alicia, I think we all know at the end of the day, whether or not the changes help you to repigment, everyone can benefit from living a healthier lifestyle in your relationships, in your work, your energy, how your clothes fit, your confidence. And guys, we are one of the unhealthiest countries in the world, in the whole world. And one of the problems is that we have been kind of conditioned to think that exercise solves everything. Oh, I'll just join a gym, then I'll be healthy. Oh, I'll just start riding my bike, then I'll be healthy. But you can see that and this, I don't know if I have the exact study in here, but there's this really interesting study that shows as gym memberships have increased, like diabetes and obesity is still increasing. The gym is not going to solve all of our problems. Exercise is important, but it's not, the best way to say it is you can't out exercise a bad diet. You just can't. Past the age of 21. I feel like when I was in college, I could like eat a pizza and like go for a run the next day and I felt great. Then I like started more adulting and realizing like that's not going to work anymore. So as we get older, we have to start to realize what, Jeter? My dog is getting angry with me. That our nutrition is really, really important. 1 second here. Come on, get out of here. Sorry about that. The joys of working from home. Okay, so old school thinking on nutrition. All I need to look at are the numbers. If it fits in my calorie range, I'm good to go. That is not necessarily the right thinking. This is my favorite. Oh, but Lauren, isn't everything in moderation okay? No, it is not. Hi, honey. No, it is not. That was one of the triplets coming in. Sorry about that. So everything in moderation is not okay. As Dave found out, there is no amount of wheat that he can have that is okay. There's no amount of dairy that he can have that's okay. And even if you don't have food sensitivities, for example, trans fat, there's no amount of trans fat that is safe to consume. So everything in moderation is not okay. And the more that we can accept that and not use it as an excuse to eat whatever we want, the faster you're going to get to a better place in your health. Oh, I know. How about if I eat well? Well, I don't need to supplement. That's not necessarily true. Again, you could eat 27,000 calories a day, and you're still not going to get all the nutrients you need because of crop rotations. Our food supply is just not as healthy as it should be and as it was 100 years ago. So supplementation is important. Doesn't mean you have to spend $1,000 a month, but there are some general supplements that everyone can benefit from. Oh, Lauren, but I just need a meal plan. No, you don't. No, you do not. What you need to learn is how to plan your meals. And meal plans are just this piece of paper that you're going to get bored with in about 2 weeks. So a better long-term strategy is to learn how to plan meals, how to figure out what to eat, and not just have someone write it down on a piece of paper for you. So it doesn't mean we don't help you figure out what to eat, but it's not like we just email over 1,800 calorie meal plans and say, have a nice day. All right. And then this labeling foods in old school thinking also, yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and touch on this last one around the fats and carbs are bad. Everybody needs a different approach. And in every category, fat, protein, and carbs, there are really, really good ones and really, really crappy ones. So you can't just put one food in a category and say carbs are bad. Well, guess what, guys? Most people don't know this. Vegetables are a carb. And we wouldn't say that those are bad. So we really have to take a step back and look at, well, how are we deciding what's good and bad? So our approach is, again, looking at ingredients, quality versus quantity. We need to look at moderation for you. What is the right term? Moderation for you of sugar, of fats, of proteins, of exercise, and so on and so forth. So I've already shared a few of these things, but I just wanted you to know a little bit around our approach that we take with our clients. So if you're on this call and again, you're like, Lauren, that's been real. I appreciate all of your recommendations, but like, I'm not in a place to get diagnostics. I'm not in a place to start taking supplements. I'm not, all of those things. These things on here are 4 things that every person listening to this technically can do that can help with your nutrition. 1, eat vegetables. I don't care if you eat McDonald's every day. Keep eating it, but add vegetables in. Adding in those vegetables is a great way to start getting in the nutrients that your body needs to function. I'm not saying you should eat McDonald's. In fact, I really like, my kids will never, I just kind of told them McDonald's closed forever. So they don't know. But getting those vegetables in is so important. I don't care if they're cooked. I don't care if they're canned. I don't care if they're roasted. I don't care if you made somebody else make them for you. You just go to a restaurant, get them in. The second is staying hydrated. And so if we think about detoxing our body, water not only helps us we need it to stay alive, as everyone knows, but it's a really important element of detoxification. So a good way to figure out how much water you need is to take your ideal body weight. So let's say you weigh 200 pounds, but you're trying to get like 180 is like your sweet spot. Then you would take 180 divided by 2. And you'd want to be aiming for about 90 ounces of water per day versus maybe there's someone listening that their ideal weight is 120. Then you would divide that by 2. So they would only need about 60 ounces of water per day. So that's how you can personalize your water recommendations versus the like 8-ounce glasses. I don't know who came up with that, but like, that's not necessarily right for everybody. Eat until 80% full. So if we think about our gut and how can we start to better digest food, one of the things, in fact, my dear husband, I'm honestly surprised that, he even sits at the dinner table with me anymore. I'm like, honey, slow down. Honey, slow down. Put your fork down. Put it down. Like put it down between bites, just slowing down and enjoying the food that you're eating, and chewing it, swallowing it, taking a breather, and then taking your next bite. It helps you to start to realize, A, you probably don't need as much food as you think to be full, but B, it helps you to better digest your food. And guys, remember, it's not you are what you eat, it's you are what you digest and absorb. If you can't digest and absorb your food, what's the point of eating other than the fact that it tastes good, right? But we need to get those nutrients into our body. And so a great way to help also with like blood sugar balance, which is a whole nother topic for another day, is trying to not eat until we're overly full. And then the last one is if you can't say it, don't eat it. So I will not ask for a raise of hands, but I'm hoping deep down inside that when you leave this call today, one of the things that you can do is when you start to buy foods, the next time you go to the grocery store, even walk to your pantry tonight to grab a snack, I challenge you to read the ingredient list. Are there things on there that you don't even know what they are? Are there words you can't pronounce? How do we start to think about replacing those things with whole food options? And that alone is, again, going to help you get in the nutrients that your body needs. All right. Really quickly about us, we're way over on time, so I'm going to speed through these. You can read the website, you can call me, email me, whatever. Basically, we're a team. We've got doctors, we've got nutrition and health coaching experts, we've got movement experts, and we work as a team with our clients to get them customized plans and then get them one-on-one support. These are some shots from our new studio. We opened in the middle of COVID, so unfortunately we weren't able to have a grand opening. This month we're actually having a month-long COVID-friendly open house where basically you can come in by appointment only, go on a tour, have a consultation, etc. So if you have questions about that, let me know. These are some of our amazing clients that we've worked with. And then if you do have questions, these are just some ways that you can learn more. You can schedule a tour. We have a coffee and a scan event coming up next Saturday, so a week from today, where you can come in and get a free scan. Anyone can come and get a custom plan from us. You can work with a trainer for a free session. You can see this pretty face on Facebook every week. I go live, as do other experts from our team, just to provide you free content and education. So you just like us on Facebook or Instagram, and our website is listed here. Woo! We did it.
Nice.
All right. So I can stick around for a little while still for questions. But if you have to jump off, again, just like, thank you for being on this and for inviting, David and I here to talk today.
Awesome. Thank you guys. This is great. This is great for sure. One question.
Yeah.
The sensitivity tests that you can just buy on the mail, how accurate are those, and is that a starting point?
It's a great question. So there is another company out, Everlywell. It's one of the most common food sensitivity testing. So the question about accuracy, they're pretty reliable. The one thing that can be tricky is, let's say that like you cut out gluten for a month. You wouldn't want to do the test until you've added gluten back in, because if you've removed the food, then you might not actually show a sensitivity to it. So you might actually have a false negative. So if you're going to do the testing, I would basically keep your diet exactly as it is when you test. And then if you want to make some changes, wait till the results come back. With Everlywell, you do get some sort of consultation, but they don't really offer any coaching support after the fact. So it's like, hey, you get this sweet printout with your results, and here's how to take them out, and here's when to add them in, and here's a grocery list, but they're not really going to strategize with you long term and help you figure out when to reintroduce what. So with ALA-tests, basically what we do is you do the test, you get the full report, and then we have some coaching options to help you through the whole process. Because the last thing we'd want you to do is spend money on it and be like, oh, this is great, now I know my results, and then you never use it, which I've actually had happen with a friend of mine. And years later, she's like, oh yeah, I had this report once that said I shouldn't eat gluten. I'm like, did you cut it out? She's like, well, no, I don't know, not really. I'm like, okay, we need to have a chat. So,
okay.
Anyway. But yes, they are good.
Gotcha. David, do you still have the diagnosis of lupus, and are you cured?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I meant to mention that it's a pretty important sort of fact. So I still go to the doctor and get tested annually. And at this point, and it has been like this since I started re-pigmenting, which is the connection of the foods, pretty much my bilirubin levels are completely normal. They're maybe from time to time ever so slightly elevated, but compared to my testing results prior to my change, it's like night and day. The doctor's blown away by the results. So I have literally, and this is being polar honest, I was telling Lauren, I feel like I've slipped a little bit lately with the COVID thing, owning two businesses. It has been an absolute stressful experience for me as a business owner. I mean, it has been a nightmare. And I, didn't share that I built a big venue in the middle. I broke ground February 10th, and I was building, this big venue during that time. So it's been an incredibly stressful time, and I feel like I woke up this morning and my joints hurt a little bit. Nothing compared to what they used to, but I know it's stress related. I'm still doing the food thing, so I can't imagine if I was doing the food, thing, eating poorly again and having the stress. So, so I'm going to be getting back with Lauren to get back on track in terms of just more and more stress management than anything.
Okay, sorry. Does nightshade plants cause inflammation, and can it be counterproductive for the treatment of vitiligo?
It could be. It could be. And I think that's where it goes back to the diagnostics, that I can't sit here and say everyone should cut out nightshades, because I just don't know. And I don't, I try to avoid blanket statements. That's why we really try to take that individualized approach. But that's something obviously certainly David found out. Can they be more inflammatory? Yes, but that doesn't mean 100% of people need to cut them out.
Gotcha. And then since vitamin supplements are not FDA controlled, how can we be sure they work?
That is a great question. So you're right, they're not. So it's interesting with supplements, like if me and Alicia were to go make a supplement company called like Alicia and Lauren Supplements, all the FDA would say is, hey, Alicia and Lauren, you need to come up with a regulatory process for your products, but we don't really care what it is. You just need to have one. So yeah, it's a little bit of a scary world out there with supplements. Some of the things that you can do first would be check for a stamp that says GMP. That stands for Good Manufacturing Practices. So that's a good starting place. Ideally, if you can find brands that are pharmaceutical grade, I mean, that's where you're really getting into the good stuff. Off the top of my head, some brands that I really like are Ancient Nutrition, Thorn, Metagenics, Designs for Health. I mean, there's a lot of really good ones out there. Even Garden of Life is pretty good. Actually, the guy who created Garden of Life, his name's Jordan Rubin. He partnered with Dr. Axe to create Ancient Nutrition. So the Garden of Life are really good. They're a little bit more affordable. I think the key thing for whoever asked that question to remember is to remember the 5 R's. So removal is the first thing. So it's great to take supplements. And don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, I take a bunch every day, but if you can't absorb nutrients, they're not going to do anything for you. So for example, I have a client who had just started with, she's taking vitamin D. And I said, well, we should get your D levels tested. She's like, well, I take it every day. And I'm like, but have you ever had a baseline? So there's no way for you to know what your baseline was. You started taking it. Did your levels go up? And so that's really important, that when you make changes that you're assessing to make sure, the change I made, did it do something for me or not? So anyway, and generally speaking, I will say with supplements, it's not what anyone wants to hear, but generally the more expensive ones are better, because they're using, the reason why like Costco has super cheap vitamins is because they're using super cheap forms of certain vitamins. Like for example, vitamin D, there's a million different forms of it. Calcium, there's a million different forms of it. So supplement companies will just use the really crappy forms, and that's how they can make it so cheap, versus saying, well, no, we want to use a really good form of, for example, folate. Most people who are pregnant take folic acid, which you really shouldn't take. You need to take methyl tetrahydrofolate, which is more expensive. So like those supplements are going to cost more, but generally they're better for you. Sorry, that was really long-winded.
No, that's good. How do you measure health improvements or progress?
Yeah, so ideally you would do it holistically, meaning you would not just use a scale. So at E Squared, what we use is a 3D body scanner. So we can actually look at your body composition, how much body fat and how much muscle mass do you have. You would also look at your movement. Like, can you go into a squat past 90 degrees without pain? If you can't, okay, that's another measurement of health. Like, how well does your body move? You would look at mental and emotional stress. Are you sleeping at night? if you can't, if you wake up in the middle of the night with a racing mind, that also would indicate we're not at optimal health. How your skin, right? So if someone is dealing with a ton of dry skin or vitiligo or whatever it is, that's a measurement of health. So there isn't one singular measurement of health. We want to look holistically to see, well, are we moving all of these things in the right direction?
Wonderful. What are some foods that help with eliminating toxins in your body? I guess we kind of.
Well, okay. So there's I guess the biggest way I could explain it would be fiber. So one of the things that fiber is going to do is it's going to bind toxins in the body and help you remove them. But this, really important, this does not mean go buy Fiber One bars, which are loaded with sugar, right? So when we think about fiber, we want to think about things like vegetables, berries. If you're going to do grains, we want to do true whole grains. Guys, whole wheat bread is not a whole grain. Okay, that is a whole grain product. So we might look at something like oats, quinoa. If you're, staying away from grains, which might be a good idea, then we would look at like flaxseed, chia seeds, beans. Those types of things are great sources of fiber. And I will have my clients take a fiber supplement like psyllium husk, or use like the keto fiber from Ancient Nutrition to help get that extra fiber in. But in terms of detoxing heavy metals per se, you might need to look at more like what's called NAC. It's N-acetylcysteine. And that is a supplement that, and honestly, David, that might be what was in that nasty drink you had to drink. That might have been like a liquid N-acetylcysteine that binds those heavy metals and helps pull them out of the body.
It sounds very familiar, yes.
If you could recommend books or cookbooks or things that somebody could go out and get today, what would you recommend?
Well, again, if you're, I guess I can answer it in two ways. One, yeah, there's some certain styles of eating that I recommend, but I think we have to look at someone like a David to say, hey, if I had told David to go paleo, it probably would have worked really well for him because that cut out sugar, gluten, dairy. But for example, people that are sensitive to eggs, well, you can still have eggs when you're keto. When you're paleo. So it's, if you're just looking to eat healthier foods, probably one of the best things you can do is go paleo, because that's going to automatically remove gluten, dairy, added sugar. It is going to be grain free, so it can be more aggressive. I eat like a paleo light diet where like no gluten, really no added sugar. I'm not eating eggs currently because I have a sensitivity to them, but we do eat some grains, but we do like chickpea pasta rather than, whole wheat pasta. So I think paleo is a good option. The Mediterranean diet books would be a pretty good option. Those are probably the best two starting places. And I actually just busted out some old cookbooks. I was going to say look online, but it's kind of nice to like read an actual book and not be staring at a screen. So Against All Grains, that is written by Danielle Walker. She had a bunch of autoimmune stuff and infertility issues and went grain free. Also, like Mark Hyman has good cookbooks. There's tons of good options out there, but I think the more that you can limit like a lot of processed foods, vegetable oils, that type of thing, that's like heading in the right direction.
Yeah. And this is something I'm sure David can attest to traveling overseas, but we had gone to Holland a couple of years ago and we were only there for 10 days. And it was amazing how much better I felt because of the food I was eating. And I wasn't changing my diet. We were still having burgers and whatever else, nothing healthy, but I felt better. And I'm sure with being in Italy for as long as you go, the changes in diet too, it's crazy.
Well, and the gluten thing is interesting because the gluten that is used in the United States is like hopped up GMO gluten. Like it's not good for you. And so that's where, like, when people do travel out of the country and into Europe, often they are like, oh, I can't eat bread at home. But when they go across seas, they can have it because they're using a better quality, lower gluten bread, and like fresh pasta and all of that with like the different types of wheat than we use here. And one of the biggest problems, honestly, with gluten isn't even the gluten protein itself. It's all of the pesticides and chemicals that are sprayed on the wheat itself. And then those are in the foods that you're eating. So it's a bigger problem than even just the gluten. But for most of my clients, I find feel better when they're eating no or a lot less wheat.
Do your kids eat the same diet as you? One of our
Yes.
questioners
Yes.
have 6 children, so.
100%. In fact, we just had our oldest and one of the triplets have both been tested for food sensitivities because they both, so Jack, who is 14, ADHD, eczema. So, and I kid you not, we had him do this food sensitivity testing, and he said to my husband, Chris just shared this with me this morning. He said, do you think like it could be working already? And Chris was like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, I feel more focused at school. Like, now granted, he also just turned 14. He's in 8th grade. So there's other changes going on, but like, he's filling out his homework assignment every night. He's already cleaned out his locker twice. I'm like, dude, it's like the first week of school. Like, but yes, 100% our kids eat all of the same foods we do. They don't always like them. But we put salmon on our plate. We put salmon on their plate. We put, grass-fed burgers on our plate. We put them on their plate. We don't really eat any gluten. We picked up ice cream for dessert tonight, but we don't like keep it in the house. In fact, Chris and I both really wanted something naughty last night and we literally had nothing. So I had like a granola bar or something. It was stupid, but I was like, we don't have any bad food in here to eat. But yes, our kids do. And it takes time. They're not always happy with me, but the triplets, they're only 3. They don't know any difference. I'm trying to start them young. I'm not expecting cereal for breakfast and Pop-Tarts and all that crap. Like, kids are not as resilient as you think they are. And if you look at David's story, you look at what he ate growing up, that kind of set the stage, unfortunately, for where he was at. So it's really important that we get our kids into those good habits young.
For sure. Someone said, because food is so much more than just food, how do you help your clients handle the mental challenges that come with changing the way they eat? Food is such a big part of our culture. So much of our social experiences are around food.
100%, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So all of our coaches, myself included, are nutrition experts, but we're also certified coaches. So we're trained in the art of behavior change and in coaching, motivational interviewing, all of the coaching techniques, if you will. And that is why really what we do is we give our clients a plan, but then we partner with them on implementing the plan because everyone's going to implement it differently, faster, slower, more changes, less changes. And we also are trying to help people balance what they want versus the changes that they're willing to make. And a lot of times it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Like, we're not here to judge, shame, blame, criticize you for a certain thing. It's helping to empower you. And I will say, one of the things I have found super interesting over the last few years that's kind of occurred to me is my clients know what to do. What trips them up is when they are at dinner with their girlfriends or they're at Christmas and their well-intentioned family and friends are like, well, why are you doing that? And they like don't know what to say. And so they're like, I don't want the questions. So therefore I'm not going to make changes because I don't want anyone asking me why I'm not eating gluten. And so one of the biggest tips I can give you is don't ever talk about weight loss. If someone says, well, why aren't you eating that? Well, I'm trying to lose weight. Never say that because all they're going to do is say, what are you talking about? You don't need to lose weight. You're fabulous. You look awesome. You keep doing you. Versus just saying, I feel better. I feel better when I don't eat gluten. I feel better when I only have 1 glass of wine instead of 2. No one's going to argue with how you feel, or I have more energy in the morning. So make it more about how you feel and less about your weight, and it takes all the pressure off.
Okay. Can you provide information regarding insurance coverage and planning and testing?
Yes, absolutely. So we do complimentary benefits checks with all of our clients. So we literally, a gal, our revenue cycle manager or director calls your insurance and says, hey, this is what Jim wants to do. Talk to me about, has he hit his deductible? Has he not? What does his plan cover? What is it not? So we literally sit down and go through the options with you for lab testing to say, if you went through your insurance, here's what the cost could look like. We never know 100% because insurance is like crazy confusing. If you went the cash route, here's what that would look like. Do you have an HSA? So we help you understand all of your options to like make the best decisions possible. Coaching, we are in network with a Blue Cross Blue Shield and one America's PPO. So for coaching to work with a dietitian, that is covered under some plans, but unfortunately we're only in network with those 2 plans right now. But the lab testing and stuff, you would have, anyone can run their labs through insurance. What most people actually end up finding is it's cheaper to go the cash route. But this time of year, a lot of people have met deductibles. It's actually a great time of year to start looking at your insurance plan, to see, have you met deductibles? Now, are you maybe in a co-insurance situation? But it can be a good time of year to utilize your benefits.
And last question here. We have a lot of people that aren't from Minnesota on this Facebook Live and on this call.
Yeah.
Best reference that they can find someone like you all over the country. Like, is there a website?
No. We're all virtual too.
You're all
Anyone can work with us. We have clients in Colorado, Nebraska, New York State, Florida. So we can do everything virtually. The only thing we wouldn't be able to do is that 3D body scan, but all the lab testing, all the coaching. We have clients who do virtual training sessions, even in Minnesota, because they're not comfortable quite with COVID coming in yet. Whereas we only allow 2 people to train at once. We're very COVID friendly at our studio, but we can work with anyone literally all over the country.
That's wonderful news.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to wrap up. Is there anything you two want to say before I say goodbye?
I just want to say thank you all
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Yeah.
And I just sent a message out with my email. So if anybody would want to reach out to me, for any personal questions regarding my story, I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
And the other thing, I do have one thing, Alicia, that I will say is, if someone is thinking like, oh gosh, like I want to find out more about E Squared or whatever, anyone can come do a custom plan for free, literally no strings attached. You can get your assessment, meet with a coach and get a plan, and that's always free. So I just want to throw that out there, because it can be kind of like, where do I start and how much is all this going to cost? Like, there's not any pressure and kind of, in that scenario. So
it's really hard to go back to that slide that has your information on it again.
No, not at all.
Let's just pop that up there again for all to see.
Yeah, we'll go all the way back to the beginning, an hour and a half ago. Oh my goodness, you guys, I need a glass of wine. I don't know about you guys.
Right? There's a lot to cover. This is why we wanted to do this, because there is so many questions and thoughts, and Lord knows I need to do something. I'm 3 in with my autoimmune diseases. So yeah, this is very interesting. So
well, thank you, Alicia, for getting it all organized.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yes. Yeah, thank you guys for being a part of this, and thank you everybody for tuning in and taking time out. And there's Lauren's information, and David, we can get his information for those who want it. But yeah, that's all we have for today. Thank you guys so much for joining. And hopefully we'll be doing something like this in the future again. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
bye, guys.